The foreman's challenge cut through the hum of wrenches like a gunshot. You've got until sunset to rebuild that Mustang's heart, or you're out of the shop for good. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me. This is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. A thin mist curled through the open garage doors of Remington Auto Repair as the first pale light of dawn slipped over the rooftops of Mill Creek. The air smelled of damp asphalt and engine oil, mingling with the sharp tang of brake fluid that had dripped onto the concrete floor long ago. Overhead, the fluorescent bulbs buzzed softly, fighting against the gloom beneath them. In one corner, a row of hydraulic lifts lay empty, their steel arms coated with the grime of 1,000 flat tires and busted pistons. A single mop bucket, its yellow plastic dulled by years of use, sat beside a stack of oily rags, waiting for the janitor who would soon arrive to wrestle the shop back to order. Daniel Matthews stepped into that hush, the heels of his scuffed work boots echoing faintly against the stained concrete. He paused for a moment at the threshold, taking in the scene as if meeting an old acquaintance. His uniform, navy coveralls patched to the knees, fit him a little loosely these days, the fabric faded by countless washes and scrub sessions. His dark hair, usually pulled back in a neat ponytail, slipped free at the nape of his neck, a few strands sticking to his forehead with dampness. Daniel let out a slow breath, the steam rising from his lungs as he began his morning ritual. First came the sweep, long, deliberate strokes of the broom that gathered stray nuts, metal shavings, and the occasional lost socket. He worked from one end of the bay to the other, careful not to miss even a sliver of metal that could one day puncture a tire or jab an unsuspecting foot. With each pass, he imagined he was erasing yesterday's mistakes, knocked over oil cans, spilled coolant, the frantic footprints of mechanics racing to their next job. But the more he swept, the more he noticed the stubborn stains that refused to lift like memories etched into the shop floor. Those he scrubbed with a bristle brush and a stiff cleaner, the harsh chemicals stinging his hands through thin gloves. By the time Daniel set the mop aside and reached for the wringer, sunlight had broken fully over the horizon, washing the garage in a pale golden hue. He leaned on the mop handle, head bowed, and allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He wasn't supposed to be here. Exactly. His real ambition lay not in sweeping and mopping, but in understanding the heartbeat of machines. He had spent every spare minute reading repair manuals, watching old mechanics at work, even tinkering with his grandfather's rusted tractor years ago. But life had a way of grinding dreams into dust. A car accident that left bills piling high, a rent increase that chased him from one cramped apartment to another, and then the steady hum of responsibility that whispered, "Someone has to keep the floors clean." A blast of voices broke his reverie. From the back office came the laughter of the day crew. Mike Patterson, the head mechanic, with his booming voice and grease-stained forearms, Laura Reed, whose sharp tongue concealed her genius for diagnostics, and Tom Tinker Jacobs, whose steady hands could coax almost any stubborn engine back to life. They emerged one by one, lids of coffee cups steaming in their hands, jockeying for the best spot near the workbench bulletin board where job orders were pinned. Daniel pulled the rag from his pocket and wiped a drop of sweat from his temple before picking up a clean bucket of water. As he passed, Mike slapped him on the shoulder. "Morning, Danny boy," Mike called, his grin wide enough to show the coffee stained down his front tooth. Ready for another thrilling day of floor maintenance? Daniel forced a small smile. "Can't wait." His voice sounded flat even to his own ears. In another life, he might have been Mike's equal, trading quips between engine rebuilds. But here he was the janitor, a title he carried with both pride in his work and a sharp pang of longing for more. He dipped the mop into the bucket and began his second pass, gliding the wet strands across the floor in sweeping arcs. The other mechanics shuffled past him, each absorbed in their routines, checking parts catalogs, consulting phone calls with irate customers, and joking about the latest curbside breakdown. The garage was waking up, a living thing coming to life under the sway of hydraulic lifts and the clatter of wrenches. Daniel found comfort in the rhythm, the steady push and pull of the mop mirroring the pistons he longed to understand. Halfway through the bay, he spotted the source of today's biggest challenge. Parked under the central lift stood a vintage 1967 Mustang, its once bright red paint dulled to a deep maroon by decades of sun and weather. The hood was propped open, revealing an engine that looked more like a cipher than anything mechanical, wires snaking in every direction, staining the metal with black soot and rust. Rumor had it the car belonged to a local lawyer who had challenged Mike to fix a mysterious knock in the engine before sunset. Mike had accepted a bet. If he failed, he'd wash the lawyer's 3 cars for free. If he succeeded, the lawyer would host a barbecue in the shop, complete with catered ribs and cold beer. Everyone had placed their side bets, except Daniel. He paused at the edge of the circle of mechanics and watched as Mike knelt beside the engine, tapping his chin with a greasy finger. Next to him, Laura consulted a tablet. Her brow furrowed as she scrolled through an online forum dedicated to vintage Ford engines. Tom stood back, arms crossed, nodding at both of them as if he already knew how the puzzle would resolve. Daniel's fingers itched. He needed to step forward and share his observations. The uneven wear on the camshaft lobes, the slight warp in the manifold gasket, the telltale sheen of unburned oil on the piston walls. But he held back, reminding himself of his place. The janitor's role was to clean, not to diagnose. A sudden rumble from the Mustang's engine bay drew everyone's attention. Mike kicked the block prop, lowering the hood with a clang that echoed off the concrete walls. "All right," he said, standing and stretching his back. "Time to hear this thing run." With a dramatic flourish, he climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then caught in a harsh roar that filled the garage like a living beast. It ran unevenly, its growl cutting out in places before roaring back to life, as if it were gasping for breath. Laura peered over the fender, her lips pressed into a thin line. "That knock sounds deeper than a bad bearing," she said quietly. "Could be a crack block." Or, she broke off, glancing at Mike. "You really think you can fix this before sundown?" Mike grinned, wiping his hands on a rag. "One way to find out." He opened the door and stepped down from the car, his confidence unshaken. "And I've got a secret weapon." He looked at Daniel, who had edged a little closer to overhear. "Have you ever touched an engine, Danny?" Heat rose in Daniel's chest. He met Mike's expectant gaze, but shook his head. "Nah," he said softly. Mike laughed. "Well, maybe this is your chance to learn." He tossed Daniel the rag he'd been using. "Watch closely." Daniel frowned, catching the rag with one hand. Mike and Laura set to work, hauling the Mustang onto the lift and jacking it up until its underbelly hovered 3 feet above the ground. Oil dripped onto a pan, and the smell sharpened Daniel's senses. He moved to stand alongside them, his heartbeat ticking faster as if it had become part of the garage's machinery. Tom leaned in, pointing at a weld seam near the oil pan. "See that hairline crack? That's your culprit, but patching it won't be enough. You need to support the crank, replace the seals, maybe even pull the head." Mike raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You've been reading my manuals, Tink?" Tom just smirked. Daniel recognized the term crank support. He'd stumbled across it in one of the repair guides he kept hidden in his locker. He swallowed hard, the rag twisting between his fingers. Something inside him stirred, a spark he had long tried to smother with the routine comfort of his janitor's work. Now that spark flared, bright and undeniable. But before he could speak, the overhead speakers crackled. "Hey, Matthews," called the foreman's voice. "We got a break room inspection at 8 sharp. Clean it up, will ya?" Daniel glanced at the clock above the parts counter, nearly 7:30. He had time, maybe just enough to learn something today, maybe even to prove he belonged. He took a steadying breath and folded the rag. When he looked back at the Mustang's engine, he saw not a tangle of metal and wires, but a puzzle waiting for its solver. At that moment, the garage felt poised on a knife's edge. The day had begun with the usual routine, sweeping floors, wiping down benches, but now it held the promise of something more. the chance to step beyond old roles and into the unknown. Daniel tightened his grip on the rag and squared his shoulders, ready to face the challenge. Rain began to streak the windows of the garage, pattering against the metal roof like soft applause. As droplets slid down the glass, they blurred the world outside, isolating this small enclave of steel and sweat. Here, under the humming lights and the scent of oil, a simple janitor stood at the threshold of a bet that could change everything. And as the first day of the gamble dawned, Daniel felt the weight of possibilities settle in his heart, a burden that felt better than any mop handle he had ever grasped. Daniel didn't plan to stay past quitting time, but the Mustang's rattling refusal to run had him rooted to the concrete floor long after the bay doors had rolled shut. He cleaned the last of the coffee-stained cups from a break room, gathering them into a crate as fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A low rumble of thunder hinted at the storm gathering outside, an unspoken reminder that nature, like the human heart, harbored secrets that only revealed themselves when pressed. He carried the crate back toward the workbench, hands slick with soap and hesitation. Every tool had been returned to its place, every rag folded and tucked away. The silence felt heavy, as though the garage itself were holding its breath. Daniel paused at the Mustang, craning his neck to peer into the lift shadows. The engine lay open and still, its pistons cold and expectant. He should leave it for Mike in the morning, but something prodded at him, a whisper of curiosity that had nothing to do with his janitor's duties. A scrap of paper fluttered beneath the car's tire, a folded note, yellowed and creased as if it had been here long before today's bet. Daniel knelt, brushing away a smudge of oil to read the scrawled words. "You won't finish what you've started. He's already lost." The handwriting was jagged, urgent, his breath caught. Who had left this? Mike? Tom? Or someone with a grudge against the old Mustang? The note's threat churned in his mind like gasoline. He tucked the paper into his pocket, heart pounding. As he stood, a flash of lightning cracked across the windows, illuminating the garage in stark relief. In that split second, Daniel saw movement behind the tool cabinets, a shadow slipping between the rows of sockets and wrenches. His pulse quickened. He set down the cleaning crate and stepped forward, mop handle in hand like a makeshift sword. "Who's there?" he called, voice unsteady. The thunder answered with a hollow roll, but the garage offered no reply. Daniel crept toward the darkened corner. A chair, overturned, a coil of air hose, strewn across the floor. And then, at the far end of the bay, a figure ducked beneath the Mustang's open hood. Daniel froze. It was someone he didn't recognize, tall, lean, wearing a dark hoodie that hid their face. The stranger's gloved hands fiddled with the manifold bolts, loosening them until one dropped with a soft ping. The sound echoed unnaturally in the quiet. Daniel's grip tightened on the mop. "For God's sake, stop," he blurted. The intruder jerked upright, head snapping toward him. Under the hood, the car's light cast a pale glow on their face. A young man, maybe a few years older than Daniel, eyes wide with panic. He wheeled away, yanking off his gloves. Daniel saw a flash of recognition, a keyed logo on the sleeve, Mill Creek Racing Association. The stranger bolted past Daniel, up the service ramp, and into the gathering storm. Daniel wanted to give chase, but his legs were leaden. Instead, he watched the back of a dark jacket disappear into the night. He backed away from the Mustang, heart slamming in his chest. The storm's first raindrops tapped the garage door like impatient fingers. Daniel lit the bay lights, his breath fogging in the sudden chill. He opened his hand and stared at the crumpled note in his palm. "You won't finish what you've started. He's already lost." He sank onto an empty hydraulic lift, the metal cold against his coveralls. 1,000 questions swirled. Who was that kid? Why sabotage the engine? And did Mike know? Or was someone out to frame him? Daniel's mind darted back to the day's chatter about the lawyer's wager. He thought of the barbecue promise, the laughter, and the bets. Everything had seemed simple, even fun. Now it tasted bitter like burned oil. His phone buzzed, cutting through the storm's roar. He fished it from his pocket. A text from Laura? "Hey, Mike's running late. Something about a meeting. You around?" Daniel's fingers hovered over the reply. If he told her about the intruder, she might alert Mike, or she might think he was making excuses. Better to see what happened in the morning. He typed, "Leaving soon. All quiet here." No sooner had he hit send than his radio crackled. The foreman's voice broke through the static. "Matthews, you locked up? Parking lot's flooding." Daniel grabbed his keys and headed for the exit, pausing only to drop the bucket beside the tool cabinet. The Mustang's engine bay loomed behind him, its open throat promising secrets he dared not explore alone. Outside, rain had turned to a steady downpour. The asphalt shimmered under the streetlights, and water pooled in every dip. Daniel slipped on the slick surface, heart still hammering. He crossed the lot and pulled the heavy door closed with a clang that echoed like a gunshot. Locking it, he tucked the note into his locker and punched in the code. His locker door banged shut, final and unforgiving. The storm sound faded behind steel and concrete. Daniel walked to his old hatchback, rain dripping from his hood. He set his mop and bucket in the trunk, usual tools for an unusual shift, and started the engine. The tires hissed as he rolled into the street, painting the darkness with red taillights. On the drive home, doubt gnawed at him. He thought of the young man under the hood. What was he looking for? Knowledge? Revenge? A way to wreck Mike's reputation? Daniel recalled the racing logo. The Racing Association was known for fierce pride and secret rivalries. Had Mike crossed someone? The thought made Daniel's gut tighten. Mike had bragged about fixing impossible engines, but he'd never said anything about upsetting a powerful club. Suddenly, the note in his pocket burned against his thigh. He reached down and pulled it out. In the car's interior light, the words seemed to shift. He's already lost. A trap? A warning? If the Mustang failed at showtime, Mike would look a fool, and Daniel would bear part of the blame for not speaking up. He let the note rest on the dashboard as he turned onto Main Street. The town was quiet at this hour, save for the storm's roar and the occasional street lamp flicker. Daniel's small apartment lay just beyond the last block, above a closed coffee shop. The rent was cheap, but the walls were thin, and he heard the landlord's footsteps creep along the hall at odd hours. Still, it was home. He unlocked the door and stepped into the narrow hallway. The smell of old carpet and stale air greeted him. He closed his eyes, hoping the night's tension would melt away. Instead, fatigue pressed down like a lead blanket. His eyes stung, and his shoulders ached from the day's work, and from the weight of secrets he wasn't sure he should carry. In the kitchen, Daniel prepared a cup of tea, his movements mechanical. Steam curled from the mug as he returned to the living room. The storm's light show played across the walls, shadows dancing to the rhythm of thunder. He sank into the worn couch, note clutched in one hand, tea in the other. He stared at the paper until the edges blurred. His life had been defined by routines: sweep in the morning, mop in the evening. Engines were puzzles that belonged to others. But tonight, the lines had blurred. The intruder had seen something in the Mustang and in Daniel. Someone believed he could make a difference. Someone wanted him to see. He pressed the note to his lips, as though drawing strength from its threat. "I'm not going to let him lose," he whispered to the empty room. "Not if I can help it." A flash of lightning illuminated the window, and in its glare, Daniel saw his reflection. Dark eyes, determined jaw, a janitor's uniform that seemed suddenly small. He folded the note and tucked it into his pocket once more. Tomorrow he will go back. He would confront Mike or find Tom, or even Laura, whoever he could trust. He would uncover who had sabotaged the engine and why. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, Daniel closed his eyes and let the world fade to black. The note's promise echoed in his mind, binding him to a new path, one that led far beyond the polished floors of Remington Auto Repair, deep into a web of secrets and betrayal. And when he awoke, he would step onto it without fear. Oh, for many. Daniel arrived at Remington Auto Repair just as the sun peeked over the rooftops, its pale rays slicing through the lingering mist. He unlocked the bay doors and paused at the threshold, glancing at the vintage Mustang sitting silent on the lift. The engine bay was bedecked in soft morning light, the metal surfaces glinting like hidden treasure. He'd spent the night turning the sabotage note over in his mind, but now it felt heavier, more urgent. He straightened his coveralls and stepped inside. Mike Patterson was already there, leaning against the car's fender with a cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. His usual grin was subdued, replaced by a crease between his brows. When he saw Daniel, he waved him over. "Morning, Danny," Mike said, voice low. "Hope you slept better than I did." Daniel clasped the coffee Mike offered and sipped gratefully. The bitterness cut through his nerves. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Found this under the Mustang last night." He held out the crumpled note. Mike's face hardened as he read it. He crumpled the paper in his fist, jaw clenched. "Someone's trying to scare me off the job," he muttered. "But I'm not backing down." Daniel watched him, remembering the confident figure who'd welcomed him to peek under the hood. Now, Mike looked smaller, as if the threat had robbed him of his bravado. Daniel realized how much weight this challenge carried for his mentor, no, for his friend. Laura Reed appeared at the office door, tablet in hand and eyes already on the Mustang. She wore her usual sharp-line posture, but Daniel noticed her fingers tremble as she tapped the screen. "I pulled up the engine codes that match the knock pattern," she said. "If it's a crack in the block, we're looking at a full teardown." Mike shook his head. "We don't have time for that." He glanced at Daniel. "Did you see anything else last night?" Daniel swallowed. It looked deliberate. The hoses were loose, clamps swapped. He hesitated, then added, "I think someone knows what they're doing." Lara's eyes flicked to Daniel, a mix of respect and suspicion. "You got a good eye," she said quietly, "but do you think you could help us find any other tampering points?" Daniel's heart pounded. He'd rehearsed how he'd say yes, and here was the moment. I can try," he managed. "I've been reading about these engines." Mike arched an eyebrow. "You've been reading?" Daniel nodded. "More than I let on. My grandfather taught me as a kid. I've been studying in my free time." Mike exchanged a look with Laura. Tom Jacobs then rolled in on his creeper, black grease smudged under his fingernails and a rag hanging out of his pocket. He offered a lopsided grin. "Knowledge is power," he said. "We could use another pair of eyes." The four of them circled the lift, tension humming between them. Daniel felt exposed, like he'd stepped onto a stage without rehearsal. Yet, as he crouched beside the car, tracing the oil stains and gently tugging on a misaligned hose, something calm settled in his chest. This was where he belonged. Later that afternoon, the garage floor echoed with the chatter of tools and the rumble of engines. Daniel knelt beside the Mustang, working alongside Laura, who handed him a fresh socket. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he removed the manifold, exposing the crack Tom had spotted earlier. "Good catch," Laura said softly. "Let's mark it before the sealant sets." She handed Daniel a grease pencil, and his hand shook as he drew a circle around the fracture. Mike hovered nearby, arms crossed. Daniel noticed how his mentor's eyes kept flicking to the clock. Every minute that ticked by pulled Mike further from his original confidence. Tom crouched on the other side, peering at Daniel's marking. "You've got a steady hand," he said. "Maybe I underestimated the janitor." Daniel looked up, surprise and gratitude mingling in his chest. "Thanks." He caught Mike's eye, wondering whether Mike felt threatened by his new role. Instead, Mike nodded, as though acknowledging a shift in their dynamic. "All right," Mike said, voice firmer. "Let's pull the head. Careful with the head bolts, they're torqued tight." He handed Daniel a breaker bar. "You take those. Laura, you watch the sequence." Daniel felt the weight of the bar as he lined it with the bolt head and began to loosen it. The bolt resisted, then gave with a sharp crack, echoing like a gunshot in the bay. Daniel's breath hitched. Mike slapped him on the back. "You did good." The others gathered around the removed cylinder head. Laura inspected the gasket surface, her brow furrowing. "More warping here than I expected. We'll need a new head, and that means ordering parts." Mike rubbed his chin. "We're behind schedule. If the lawyer shows up and this thing isn't running, we're toast." Daniel crouched, running his gloved hand over the warped metal. He felt a knot in his stomach. Mike's reputation, and perhaps the future of this shop, rested on this repair. Then again, Mike had tackled worse puzzles, but What Daniel had learned last night nagged at him. Someone didn't want them to succeed. He looked at Lara. Do we know how strong the racing association's reach is? If they're involved, parts could get held up. We need a backup plan. Lara blinked, surprised by his foresight. I'll call a contact I know at the parts distributor. He owes me a favor. Mike exchanged glances with Tom. Good thinking, Danny. His tone lacked the earlier doubt. Let's move. That evening, the four gathered around a battered workbench papered with engine diagrams. Outside, the storm had returned, wind rattling the windows. Daniel studied a schematic of the Mustang's valve train, tracing the flow of oil and timing marks. Lara leaned in close. You really know this stuff, she said, voice low. Why haven't you applied as an apprentice? Daniel paused, jaw tightening. I tried once, he admitted, but I don't have the connections. And every time I mention my interest, someone reminds me I'm the janitor. She nodded, understanding. That's on us. Mike, man, you should put in a good word. Mike cleared his throat. I will. I promised the foreman you'd get a look at the apprentice program. He looked at Daniel. If you can keep this up. Daniel nodded, a swell of hope rising. But beneath it a twinge of doubt. Was he really welcome, or just a tool to fix Mike's Mustang? He forced himself to focus on the schematics, tracing out the potential wear patterns that might cause the knock. Tom, leaning against the wall, watched them with folded arms. Funny, he said. You for collaborating. Never thought I'd see the day the janitor outdiagnoses Lara. Daniel met his gaze. I just want a chance. Tom's face softened. You earned it tonight. The next morning, Daniel arrived early to find Mike pacing beside the closed bay doors. His usual swagger was replaced by a stiff tension. When Daniel approached, Mike swallowed hard. They called last night, he said. Parts distributor says the head's on back order. Could be weeks. Daniel frowned. But Lara had a contact. Mike shook his head. That contact is gone MIA. Something's fishy. A cold dread slid into Daniel's chest. The Racing Association rumor had seemed distant until now. Someone didn't want that head installed, and if they held the parts, they controlled the timeline. He squared his shoulders. We can't wait. We've got to find another way. Mike looked at him, eyes wide. Like what? Daniel's mind raced. He recalled the scrap yard down the street, the one that specializes in classic Fords. We salvage one, he said slowly. Take the head off a donor car. I know a guy there. Silence stretched. Then Lara broke it. That's genius, if we can find one that fits. Tom stomped a boot on the ground. We'll go tonight. All of us. Bring tools, flashlight. Mike nodded reluctantly. Okay, we try that. But if it fails, we're done. That night, under the glow of street lamps, the four slipped into the salvage yard. Rusted chassis and dented fenders loomed like silent sentinels. Daniel led them to a row of Mustangs, each more deteriorated than the last. He stopped before one with a shattered windshield and peeled paint that still caught the moonlight in a rusty glow. This one, he whispered. 68 model. Should share the same block. Lara shone her flashlight on the engine bay. Looks complete. They set to work, wrenching off hoses and cables, extracting the cylinder head with practiced efficiency. Daniel nearly dropped the heavy piece when he lifted it, but Lara caught one corner. Together they carried it to the gate, adrenaline pounding in their veins. As they loaded the salvage head into Mike's truck bed, a siren wailed in the distance. Daniel froze. They're closing up, he murmured. Tom slammed the tailgate. Time to go. They piled in and raced back to Remington Auto Repair, engines roaring. Daniel felt a thrill. This was more than a job now. It was a mission, binding them together in a way no routine shift ever could. Back at the shop, they unmoved the salvage head into the bay, hands shaking as they lined it up for installation. The storm outside had eased to a drizzle, but inside, tension crackled. Daniel met each of their eyes. Mike's determined stare, Lara's hopeful spark, Tom's steady confidence. And for the first time, he felt equal, not the janitor, but a partner in the unfolding drama. He slid the head into place, listening to the satisfying click of bolt seating. Mike handed him the torque wrench. Daniel caught his breath, eyes on the gauge as he tightened the first bolt to specification. At that moment, the garage fell away. There was only metal and sweat, trust and betrayal, risk and possibility. And as he worked, Daniel knew that whatever came next, success or ruin, they would face it together. Daniel woke before dawn again, his mind still tangled in last night's rush. The salvage head sat on the workbench, bolts neatly lined beside it, waiting for the morning light. As he stepped into the garage, he found Tom already there, fiddling with an old Volkswagen engine by the parts counter. "Morning," Tom said without looking up. "Are you ready for the twist today?" Daniel frowned. "Twist?" Tom grinned, finally turning. "You know, life never goes as neatly as we plan." He tapped the workbench. "We need to get that head on before the lawyer shows. But be prepared. Something's bound to go sideways." Daniel sank beside the Mustang lift. When Mike and Laura arrived, the four of them moved in a wordless ballet, hoisting the head, aligning the gasket, threading the bolts. Daniel felt his heart hammer at the torque wrench's first click. All morning the rhythm held, steady, precise, hopeful. Then Lara's phone buzzed. She glanced down and paled. Daniel watched her thumb on the screen. "What is it?" Mike asked. She swallowed. "It's from someone named Royce. He says our supplier called, canceled the order." Then he added, "They found something wrong with your salvage head. It's no good." Daniel's stomach dropped. "But we took it off a running engine just last night." Laura shook her head. "He says the crack was welded over. The metal's weakened. If we fire this head, it'll blow." Mike ran a hand through his hair. "Are you sure?" His voice cracked. Laura held out her phone. A single line blazed in yellow text. "Forged fix. Mike, kill your guy. He's toast if he tries." Tom let out a bitter laugh. "That's no accident. Someone wants us dead, or at least wants to make sure the engine fails spectacularly." Daniel's chest tightened. Another layer of sabotage. And now they faced a head that would betray them under load. He looked at Laura. "Who's Royce?" Laura turned away, voice low. He's my contact at the association. I had to warn you." She swallowed again. "But he also said someone higher up wants this thing to blow. And he won't say who." Mike's face went pale. He sank onto a stool. "This is bigger than our little bet." Daniel realized the storm that had battered this project all along was not random. It came from someone powerful and close. He studied Lara's profile in the pale garage light, noticing for the first time how drawn her shoulders looked, how her gaze flickered away when the talk turned dark. "I need answers," he said, voice soft but firm. "Laura, do you know who's behind this?" Lara's lips trembled. She looked at Mike, then Tom, then back at Daniel. Finally, she closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. Okay. The Racing Association. They're behind the sabotage. They don't like Mike working outside their circle, and they think I'm loyal to them." Daniel stiffened. "You remember?" She shook her head. "Not anymore. I tried to leave, said I wanted to help here, learn from you, but they threatened me. Royce sent me the note." Tom's jaw clenched. "You mean you've been feeding them info about our progress?" Laura flinched. "I didn't want to, but they had something on me. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd ruin me and anyone who helped me." Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. He'd trusted Laura, her quiet expertise, her steady hand. Now he saw her as someone caught between loyalty and fear. "What did they threaten?" Her voice cracked. "My father. He's in a bad place, medical bills I couldn't pay. They said if I didn't do what they said, they'd make sure my father lost his home." Mike leaned in. "That's horrible." Lara's cheeks glistened with tears. "I never wanted to betray you. I thought if I just gave them small bits of info, they'd leave the engine alone, but then they set up the forged head, and I knew they were serious." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to scream at her, to shake her for letting them all walk into a death trap. But he saw, in her eyes, genuine terror. He took a breath. "Okay, we'll fix this together. But you have to stop hiding things from us." Laura swallowed. "I will. I swear." Mike stood, voice grave. "Then we need a new plan. We can't use that head. We need a real replacement, and quick. Daniel's mind raced. The day was slipping away, and the salvage yard had closed. Parts suppliers were backordered. The association likely had influence there, too. If they wanted him dead, they would intercept anything shipped. He forced himself to think clearly. What if we build our own head, he said slowly. Machine one from scratch, copper hardening, new valves, without going through normal channels. Tom whistled. You think we can do that in time? Daniel nodded. I've been studying machining techniques. My grandfather had a small mill in his barn. I know the basics. We can rig something in the back shop, use emergency forging methods. Lara's eyes widened. That's risky. But it's something they won't anticipate, Daniel said. No one will expect us to manufacture our own heads. Mike glanced at the clock. We have 12 hours until the lawyer's barbecue. Are you sure about this? Daniel felt exhaustion and adrenaline collide. I'm sure. He met Lara's gaze. You with me? She nodded, voice fierce. Let's do it. They cleared the back corner of the shop, unveiling a dusty milling machine and an old forge Tom had rescued years ago. The three of them set to work under harsh lights. Daniel pulled out diagrams he'd sketched in his notebook, valve placement, camshaft alignment, port sizes. Tom heated the metal billet in the forge until it glowed orange. Lara measured and marked, her hands steady now, fueled by determination. As sparks flew from the milling machine, Daniel felt his grandfather's presence in every stroke of the cutter. He imagined the old man's weathered hands guiding him, whispering the secrets of metal. Sweat dripped from his brow as he shaped the cylinder head's ports with painstaking care. Mike stood nearby, monitoring the process. You're doing good, kid, he said quietly, pride shining in his eyes. I still can't believe you're making a head from scratch. Daniel paused, wiping his face. We're in this together. Lara glanced at him, lips pressed tight. Just don't trust Royce or anyone else to interfere. Tom grunted and wiped soot from his brow. We're almost there. Hours passed. The furnace cooled, the metal hardened. The final milling cuts rang out in the silent shop. When the head finally sat on the workbench, gleaming unmarked by forge or weld, it looked almost too perfect to be real. Daniel placed it on the lift and ran his fingers over the smooth cuts. Let's hope it works. Lara loaded the valves. Tom bolted it into place. Mike handed Daniel the torque wrench. As he tightened the last bolt, a thrill shot through him. They had beaten the association at its own game. Late that afternoon, the lawyer arrived for the barbecue, his limousine gleaming in the lot. Mechanics lined up folding chairs under a canopy, iced tea, and ribs at the ready. Mike forced a grin, but sweat beaded on his temple. Daniel stood by the lift, his heart thundering as he watched Mike climb into the driver's seat. He turned the key. The engine caught in a smooth, deep rumble. No coughs, no sputters, nothing but a powerful, even roar. The crowd cheered as Mike eased the car forward, its engine purring like a contented beast. Daniel allowed himself a breath. They had done the impossible. Crafted a new head, outwitted the saboteurs, and saved the day. He saw Lara and Tom exchange smiles, weak, tired, but genuine. Then Daniel's phone buzzed. He frowned, unlocking it to see a message from an unknown number. Congratulations. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. His blood ran cold. The Racing Association wasn't finished. Someone had bypassed the head entirely to remind. He slipped the phone into his pocket, chest tight with dread. Mike waved at the crowd, handing out barbecue plates. Daniel forced a grin and turned back to the garage. Lara lingered beside him. You okay? She asked softly. He nodded, but his eyes were distant. This isn't over. She placed a hand on his arm. We'll face it together. Daniel looked at her, then at the shop that had become his world. Betrayal had cut deep, but in its wake he found new allies. And as the last rays of sun slipped behind the rooftops, he felt something stronger than fear. Determination. If the association wanted a war, he would give them one. The first twist had shattered their assumptions, and now the real battle was just beginning. Daniel stood beneath the flickering garage lights, the midnight hour stretching empty around him. Outside, the storm had given way to a brittle chill, and the world beyond Remington Auto Repair was veiled in fog. He leaned against the Mustang's fender, chest tight, with the gravity of the day's revelations. In his pocket lay two notes, the first threatening Mike's bet, the second congratulating them on their success. They felt like bookends to a horror story, one warning of dread, the other reminding him that the hunter was still watching. He tugged off his gloves, clenching them into fists. His mind raced with every choice ahead. He could warn Mike, Laura, and Tom, pull back from the edge and let the association win. Or he could push forward, probing deeper into the sabotage, even if it meant risking more than broken engines. The shop was quiet now, but he could almost hear the ghost of the forged head, the crack in the block, the echo of a stranger's footsteps under the lift. Laura emerged from the parts room, her silhouette leaning against the open doorway. She held a steaming mug of tea, the fragrant steam curling like ghostly fingers in the cool air. "You should rest," she said softly, concerned at her voice. "We all should." Daniel shook his head. Rest isn't an option. He flipped the threatening note onto the hood. "They want us to stop, and they'll keep escalating until one of us breaks." Her brow creased. "What are you thinking?" He met her gaze. "I'm thinking we need more information. If the association has this much reach, they must have insiders, people helping them sabotage from within." Laura set down the mug. "I've been combing member lists, phone records, anything I can find. But everyone's careful. Royce only told me enough to get the head forged. He won't answer me now." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Then I'll find him." She sank into a stool. "You can't confront the association alone." He offered a half smile. "I don't plan to." 2 nights later, Daniel found himself standing on the cracked pavement outside a rundown warehouse on the edge of Mill Creek. A single yellow bulb flickered above the rusted door. He pressed his palm against the cold metal and heard muffled voices inside, low, urgent. He hesitated. Each time he'd stepped forward bravely, he'd felt the thrill of possibility, but now his heart pounded with the certainty of danger. The door groaned open at his knock. Inside, engines lay in stacks, bodies of muscle cars stripped of paint and parts. In the center, beneath a single bare bulb, stood Royce. He was lean and pale, hair plastered by rain, eyes darting as though expecting the roof to cave in at any moment. Daniel held out the congratulatory note. Royce's shoulders sagged as he read it. They didn't wash the blood off their hands this time. Daniel said, quietly, "They want you to feel safe, then they'll strike again." Royce swallowed. "I did what they asked. I arranged the head. I thought if I kept them happy, they'd leave Laura and me alone." Daniel stepped closer. "And what about Mike? Tom? Laura? They're innocent." A tremor ran through Royce. "I know." He looked away. "I don't know who's higher up. The board, maybe one of their sponsors. It's all whispers." Daniel clenched his fists. "Then show me proof of membership. Anywhere they gather. I need names." Royce's eyes flicked to the shadows. "If they find out I helped you." "I'll protect you," Daniel said, "like you protected Lara's father." Royce swallowed again, the color draining from his face. He produced a slim folder from under the bench and handed it over. "These are meeting minutes, names, dates, coded orders. But you need to move fast. They'll see this as betrayal." Daniel nodded, tucking the folder into his jacket. "Thank you." Royce's hand brushed Daniel's arm. "Be careful." Outside, the fog had thickened, and Daniel could barely see the street lamp down the block. He swallowed the rising panic and walked away, mind already plotting his next move. Back at Remington, the next morning, the team gathered by the Mustang. Mike's eyes were red from lack of sleep, but he stood straighter as if buoyed by Daniel's resolve. Laura and Tom flanked him, each with a wrench or tablet in hand. Daniel placed the folder on the workbench. Page by page, they pored over the minutes, code names, references to Project Redfire, and a list of shop managers targeted for removal. At the bottom, scrawled in a shaky hand, was a name, Patricia Monroe, marketing chair. Lara's gasp echoed in the bay. "Monroe manages local auto shows. She's powerful. She sponsors the association's events. Tom slammed his palm on the table. So she's the one pulling strings. Mike stared at the folder. If we expose her, we could blow this whole thing wide open. Daniel felt a surge of adrenaline. Exactly. But we need proof beyond minutes. We need to catch her in the act. Lara's finger hovered over the screen. There's an event tomorrow night at the Mill Creek Pavilion. The association's annual awards gala. Monroe will be there. Mike nodded slowly. We'll go. Do what? Undercover. Daniel's mind whirled. We'll record her. Any sign she's behind the sabotage. Maybe talkative after a few drinks. We'll need a camera. Tom pointed at his pocket. Got one. He revealed a tiny body camera he used to film engine diagnostics. Lara shook her head with a smile. We're really doing this. Daniel felt his chest tighten. This was no longer about fixing an engine, it was about exposing evil purposes, and every step deeper risked their safety. That evening, the Mill Creek Pavilion shimmered with polish and chandeliers. Guests in gowns and tuxedos drifted among hors d'oeuvres and fine wine. Mike, in his best shirt and tie, checked his reflection in a mirrored column. Lara stood beside him, hair curled, eyes bright with purpose. Tom lingered at the edge of the group, scanning the crowd. Daniel's heart pounded beneath his dress shirt. They spotted Monroe at the head table, seated beside the mayor. Her hair was a perfect wave, her smile practiced. She raised a glass and made a toast to automotive excellence. Daniel slipped away, slipping the hidden camera from his pocket and training its lens on her. As the event wound down, Monroe mingled near a sidebar. She accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter, her eyes scanning the room. Daniel edged closer, camera rolling silently. She spoke into a phone, laughter trembling on her lips. Yes, the little shop will fail spectacularly. They don't know how deep association loyalty runs. Her words hung in the air. Daniel's breath caught. He focused until her words became clearer. Red Fire operation will be complete when the head goes. They'll blame the janitor. Perfect cover. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He stumbled back, nearly colliding with Lara. She grabbed his arm. What is it? He motioned toward Monroe. Monroe's behind it. She admitted it. Lara followed his gaze and read his face. Tom joined them, peering through the crowd. Monroe laughed with a small circle of aides, champagne glittering in the low light. Daniel's pulse pounded like a hammer. He'd risked everything, his job, his safety, his friendships, to unmask this woman. Now he had the proof. But one wrong move, and she'd vanish, evidence in hand. They shared a look, resolve tempered by fear. Mike stepped forward, voice steady. Monroe. She turned, eyebrows raised in polite surprise. Mr. Patterson, I didn't expect to see you here. Mike's jaw tightened. I have questions. Monroe's lips curved into a politeness that chilled him. I'm sure you do. Lara and Tom edged closer, Daniel just behind. He raised the camera. Monroe's smile faltered as she realized she'd been recorded. Gasps rippled through the small circle. The mayor frowned. Monroe's expression hardened. You have no proof. Daniel's heart hammered. I have it right here. He raised the camera, playing back the recording on its tiny screen. Monroe's words echoing in crystal clarity. The room froze. Then Monroe's mask cracked. Her eyes narrowed, and she laughed, an empty, furious sound. You think you can destroy me? Mike squared his shoulders. I don't think I know. Betrayal had run deep, but now he held the power to heal the wound. He met Lara's eyes, saw pride and fear dancing in her gaze. He met Tom's and saw unwavering loyalty. He looked at Mike, and in that moment knew he'd crossed from janitor to hero. Monroe's fury crackled like electricity. You'll regret this. Daniel gave a small nod. Maybe, but some things are worth the risk. As security escorted Monroe away, the gala's music seemed to stutter, caught between celebration and scandal. Outside, the fog had lifted, revealing a sky full of stars. Daniel realized how far he'd come, from mopping floors to dismantling conspiracies. And though he didn't know what came next, he felt certain, whatever storms lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. The wind whipped through the broken panes of the Mill Creek Pavilion's loading bay as Daniel, Mike, Laura, and Tom piled back into the old work truck. Rain began to drum on the metal roof, turning the night into a blur of sound and motion. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, heart still racing from the confrontation with Monroe. Her furious promise, "You'll regret this," echoed in his mind, but he felt strangely calm. The truth was out. Where now? Mike asked, glancing at the GPS on his phone. "We can't go back to the shop. She might send someone after us." Laura cut in from the back seat. "I called Royce. He's in a safe house, waiting with more evidence. Financial records, emails, shipping logs, everything that ties Monroe and the association to the sabotage." Daniel exhaled, relieved and resolved to mingle. "Let's go." The drive to the warehouse district was tense, the truck's headlights slicing through sheets of rain. Tom sat shotgun in the rear, holding the body camera like a lifeline. Every shadow in the side windows felt like a potential threat. Daniel thought of the empty stall beneath the Mustang's lift, of the salvage head they'd forged in secret. All of it had led to this moment, a final reckoning. They found Royce huddled beneath a flickering lamp outside a corrugated metal door. His gaunt face brightened when he saw them unload. Laura hurried forward, pulling him into a quick hug. Mike took the folder from his hand, flipping through pages as Royce retreated inside. The warehouse smelled of oil and dust. Inside, a cluster of old filing cabinets and a battered desk held stacks of documents. Royce shut the door and threw a heavy chain across it. "They can't find me here," he whispered, voice strained. "I brought everything." Daniel stepped forward, untying the chain. He unfolded the sheaf of logs first, shipping receipts showing forged head parts arriving at the distributor, then mysteriously vanishing. Next, bank transfers from Monroe's personal accounts to shell companies tied to the association's board members. Then, the damning email chain. Monroe congratulating her contacts on the successful Redfire operation. He caught Mike's eye. "This is it." Mike nodded, jaw tight. "With this, we can go to the press, to the authorities. It's over." Royce sank onto an overturned crate. "I'm done running. They won't hurt my family now." Daniel looked at Laura, whose face was pale, but shining with triumph. "Let's make sure." Within 24 hours, the evidence was in the hands of an undercover reporter from the Mill Creek Tribune and the state attorney's office. Monroe was arrested mid-morning, cuffs clicking against her designer gloves as cameras flashed. As news helicopters circled overhead, Daniel watched the broadcast from the garage break room, coffee in trembling hands. Laura stood beside him, arms crossed. Tom and Mike leaned against the counter. On the wall, a TV screen showed Monroe being read her rights. "You have the right to remain silent." The reporter's voiceover detailed the extent of her crimes. Race fixing for profit, threats against rival mechanics, the forged head that could have killed them all. Daniel felt a surge of vindication, but beneath it lay something deeper. Sorrow for how far someone could fall when ambition and greed collided. He thought of Monroe's final glare, the mechanical smile she'd used to hide her ruthlessness. And he thought of Laura, forced to betray her own morals under threat, and of Mike and Tom, who had risked everything for the shop. The TV cut to footage of the Miles County Courthouse steps. Monroe's limousine door opened, and she was led inside. Reporters shouted questions. "Why did you betray your community? Are you sorry?" She offered no words. The camera lingered on her face, pride and fear warring behind her eyes. Daniel set down his mug. "It's done." Mike clapped him on the back, a proud smile breaking through his usual reserve. "You did it, Danny. You saved this place." Daniel met Lara's eyes. She gave a small nod, her expression softening. "You saved us all." That afternoon, the bay doors of Remington Auto Repair opened wide for the first time in days. Sunlight streamed in, dust motes dancing like fireflies. The crew, minus Monroe's former ally Robbie, who had quietly resigned, gathered around the Mustang. It gleamed under the lights, its engine humming smoothly. The sponsored barbecue turned into celebratory service, Cold sodas replaced beer, the lawyer's guests cheering as the car glided down the ramp. Daniel stood on the sidelines, mop in hand but unneeded. His uniform was clean, the patches pressed flat. He watched as customers greeted Mike with congratulations, patting him on the back. Laura and Tom guided the Mustang into the open bay, inspecting the freshly forged head one last time. The machine purred like a contented beast, its roar a promise of victory. The foreman came in, clipboard in hand, eyes bright. "Good job, everyone. I've got a word with you, Daniel." He led him to a shady corner near the office. Daniel's chest tightened. He braced for the usual good mop speech. Instead, the foreman placed a letter in his hand. "It's from a corporation. They've approved your apprenticeship application. Effective next week." Daniel blinked, stunned. "An apprentice slot?" The foreman grinned. "You've earned it. Hell, you saved the shop. They can't overlook that." He winked. "Don't let me down." Daniel closed his fist around the letter, warmth spreading through him. An apprentice's life, wrenches instead of mops, engines instead of floors. A chance to fulfill the dreams his grandfather had sparked so long ago. He turned back to the garage and saw Mike beckon him over. Laura caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up. Tom waved. The shop felt alive with possibility. That evening, the four friends gathered at a quiet corner of Mill Creek Park. A picnic blanket spread across the grassy knoll, lanterns hung from low branches. Mike grilled burgers over a portable stove, filling the air with the scent of searing beef. Laura arranged plates, her smile relaxed for the first time in weeks. Tom tinkered with a miniature engine model he'd brought along. Daniel sat cross-legged, reading the apprenticeship letter by the flickering lantern light. They ate under a sky heaving with stars. Rain drums had turned to crickets' chirp. Conversation flowed easily. Jokes about Project Redfire, stories of near disasters, plans for the future of the shop. Daniel felt the weight of the past week's lift, replaced by a quiet resolve. After they ate, Mike stood and raised a soda. "To Remington Auto Repair. May our engines run true, our friendships stay strong, and may we never again be surprised by betrayal." They clinked bottles. Daniel took a deep breath, heartful, to dreams realized and to the people who make them possible. Laura smiled, eyes bright, and to face every challenge together. Tom lifted his camera, and to capture every moment, good or bad. They laughed, the sound echoing across the park. In that circle of light, surrounded by loyal friends, Daniel realized that danger and betrayal had only strengthened their bond. He'd stepped beyond mop and bucket into a world of wrenches and roaring engines, and found a family to share it with. Weeks later, as autumn painted Mill Creek in gold and crimson, Remington Auto Repair ran smoother than ever. Daniel, now in crisp coveralls marked apprentice, tightened a bolt on a sleek new coupe. Mike coached him at his side. Laura guided his diagnostics. Tom tinkered nearby. Customers lined up, bringing tasks both simple and complex. Inside the break room, the TV played a piece on Monroe's trial. She'd been convicted on multiple counts: fraud, attempted manslaughter, racketeering. The headline scrolled, "Gatekeeper of Greed brought low by janitor turned mechanic." Daniel watched, a small smile touching his lips. He closed his eyes and pictured the garage's misty dawns, the stolen nights in the forge, the stormy confrontation at the pavilion. Every moment had led him here, every sweep of the broom, every cautious glance under the hood. The world, and as he tightened the final bolt, he knew that in this shop, surrounded by friends and forged by trials, he had found his true place. The morning sun drifted through the high windows of Remington Auto Repair like a gentle promise, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the still air. Inside, the shop felt restored, not just to order but to purpose. The Mustang, once a battered cipher of sabotage and secrets, now gleamed under the lights, its engine purring softly as Mike revved it one final time before returning it to the customer. Daniel watched from across the bay, wrench in hand, a quiet smile touching his lips. The lawyer who owned the car paused by the lift and nodded at Mike and Daniel. "You lads outdid yourselves," he said, voice warm with genuine respect. "I've never heard an engine sound so smooth." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a crisp check. "Consider this a token of my gratitude and my apology for underestimating your shop." He slipped the envelope into Mike's hand, then clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "And you, young man, keep that spark alive." As the lawyer drove away, the remaining 3 mechanics gathered around the workbench. Laura wiped a stray smudge of grease from Daniel's cheek. "You deserve more thanks than we can give," she said softly. "You showed us what belief can do." Tom nudged Daniel playfully. "And here, I thought you'd go back to mopping floors after all that." His grin was genuine, free of the earlier teasing edge. Daniel laughed and shook his head, thinking of the mop bucket that had first introduced him to the world of engines and of possibility. Mike rested a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I hope you know how proud I am. Not just for saving the Mustang, but for finding the courage to stand up." His eyes glistened. "You changed my life and this shop's more than you'll ever realize." Daniel swallowed against the lump in his throat. He had long dreamt of shifting roles, of trading his janitor's coveralls for a mechanic's smock, but he hadn't known the journey would be paved with such peril and betrayal. He looked at them, his friends, his mentors, and felt a swell of gratitude. "None of this would have happened without you," he said quietly. "You all gave me a chance, when no one else would have. I needed that." Lara's gaze softened. "We needed you, too. Your faith kept us going when every door slammed shut." Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out the little body camera. "Remember this?" He pressed play, and the warehouse confession sprang to life, Monroe's voice admitting her plot, the camera's shaky angles capturing her fury. It was a reminder of darkness overcome by truth. Daniel nodded. "Every time I hear that, I remember even the strongest engine can crack under pressure, but it can also be rebuilt stronger." They let the footage play in silence, the crackling audio reminding them of the stakes they'd faced. When it ended, Laura turned off the screen and folded her arms. "So what now?" she asked. Mike glanced around the shop, breathing in the familiar scent of oil and metal. "Now, we keep building engines, trust, and perhaps something more. I've put in a request. We'll host free training nights for local students. I want to give others the chance you gave Daniel." Daniel's eyes widened. "Really? Teaching? Like an apprentice school?" Mike nodded. "Community outreach. Everyone deserves a shot at their passion, no matter their background." Lara's face lit up. "I'll help set up the curriculum. We'll teach engine basics, diagnostics, ethics, so no one falls prey to secrets and sabotage." Tom grinned. "Count me in. And I'll film it all, document the journey." Daniel felt his chest tighten with hope. The scars of deception still lingered. Monroe's betrayal, the forged head, the whispered threats. But from that darkness had grown something new, a deeper bond and a shared purpose. He pictured evenings spent teaching eager faces, students discovering engines for the first time, dreams taking shape beneath the glow of garage lights. Later that day, after the shop's final customer had driven off, Daniel found a quiet moment alone. He leaned against the hood of his own hatchback, the vehicle he'd once used to ferry mop buckets and cleaning supplies, now loaded with parts and tools for his new life. He closed his eyes and let the hum of the shop's air compressor wash over him. He thought of his grandfather's old tractor, its pistons still cold in a barn long abandoned. He remembered the warmth of oil on his small hands, the thrill of hearing metal come alive. That memory had led him here, through threats and lies, through midnight raids and courtroom revelations, to this moment of peace. A gentle breeze rattled the garage door, and Daniel opened his eyes. He picked up the apprenticeship letter from his pocket, its edges soft from constant reading. He traced the company seal with his thumb. Remington Auto Repair, apprentice mechanic. He realized it wasn't just a job title, it was a commitment to integrity, to rebuilding what greed would break. He closed his fist around the letter and pressed it to his chest. "I won't let you down," he whispered to the empty shop. Footsteps approached, and Daniel stood as Mike and Laura emerged from the break room. They carried plans for the training program, their faces alight with excitement. Ready to change some lives? Laura asked. Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of gratitude settle into determination. Let's get to work. As they moved together into the heart of the garage, Daniel felt the world shift beneath his feet. The central conflict, the sabotage, the betrayal had been resolved. Monroe's empire lay in ruins, replaced by a community dedicated to honesty and shared passion. The moral stakes had been clear. Truth and courage could outmatch secrecy and power. Now, in the quiet after the storm, Daniel embraced the true resolution. A promise to carry those lessons forward, guiding others through darkness into light. Outside, the sky had cleared, revealing a ribbon of sunset, painting the horizon in shades of amber. The engines within the shop were silent for now, but soon they would roar again, each one a testament to resilience and redemption. And as Daniel stepped toward his future, he felt the engine of his own life ignite, fueled by hope, friendship, and the unwavering belief that even the smallest spark could set the world alight. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.